Good evening. Tonight we're going to start with lesson 34 with our fractions. I can subtract mixed numbers. Now guys, today we're going to start like a standard algorithm how to solve these, basically how I learned and your parents learned from a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. But don't forget the other strategies that we learned. That could also help you. Remember, we used the inverse operation of addition to help us subtract. We used number lines. We used decomposing the second mixed number. And then we learned how to decompose the first mixed number in a subtraction problem. So let's get started. All right, we're going to subtract 5 1/4, take away 3/4. And how we're going to do that is we're going to kind of decompose this one. And we're going to pull out 4 wholes. And then we're left with 1 1/4, right? Because 4 plus 1 1/4 is 5 1/4. But if we wanted to look at this one right here, and we wanted to get that into a fraction, what we call a fraction greater than 1, that improper fraction that we've talked about, how can we do that? Well, if we look at the denominator, and the denominator is fourths, right? How does this become a fraction? What would that look like, that whole? Well, it would look like 4/4, right? This part right here would be 4/4, but we still have that fraction attached to it, which would be 1/4. So adding these two fractions up, we get 5/4. So our new kind of mixed number here is going to be 4 5/4, right? So now we could actually take 5/4 and subtract it with 3/4. So we could do 4 5/4 minus 3/4, and we get 4, and the whole is 4, and 5 minus 3 is 2, and the denominator stays the same. So it's 4 2/4. Again, we always want to make sure that we are checking to see if we can simplify. In 2/4 we can, because the factor they have in common would be 2. And this would bring us to 4 1/2. So 5 1/4 take away 3/4 is 4 1/2. All right, our next one is subtracting 6 3/8, take away 6/8. So we're going to go back and we're going to be decomposing 6 3/8, all right? And we're going to pull those 5 wholes out of there, and that means we're left with 1 3/8. All right, so if we had to decompose this one a little bit further to get to that fraction greater than 1, or that improper fraction that we talked about, we would say 1 3/8 is equal to that whole, that 1, well, what represents that whole would be 8/8. And then we need to add on that additional 3/8, which would give us 11/8. So this would become 5, this would become 5, and then 11/8. So now we can take 5 11/8, and we can subtract it with 6/8 to give us 5 5/8. Now, guys, if we look at 5/8, can that be simplified? No. They do not. 5 and 8 do not share any common factors. So the answer of 6 3/8 take away 6/8 is equal to 5 5/8. All right, we're going to subtract 4 1/5, take away 1 3/5. And it's asking us to subtract the ones first. So we need to subtract the wholes first. And how we do that is we're just going to simply taking away 4 1. And 4 minus 1 gives us 3. And we can't forget the fractions. 3 1/5, left with 3/5. All right. So now what we can do is that we can now take 3 1/5 and break that down. We could take 2 wholes, and we're now left with 1 1/5. All right, but we can't leave 1 1/5 because we want to be able to subtract it with 3/5. So our denominator says that we have it in the fifths, so we need to take that 1 and say it's 5/5 and add that extra 1/5 to bring us to 6/5. So now we've got 2 wholes and 6/5 take away that 3/5, and we are now left with 2 3/5. Now look at our fraction, 3/5. Can this be simplified? No, because 3 and 5 do not share any common factors. So 4 1/5 take away 1 3/5 is equal to 2 3/5. Subtract the ones first. All right, so 4, 3, 6, take away 2 5, 6. We want to subtract the 2 wholes, so 4 and 2 is equal to 2, 3, 6 minus 5, 6. All right, so now what we want to do is we want to decompose 2 3, 6. So when we do that, we're breaking it down to 1 and 3, 6. But we cannot subtract that. So we need to take that whole and break that into a new fraction, which would be 6, 6, plus the fraction that's attached to it, which was 3, 6. So we're left with 1 9, 6. So now we can take 1 9, 6 and subtract it with 5, 6. Because that's what we have up here. We're left with 5, 6 over here that we have to bring this down and subtract it with. And when we subtract it, we're left with 1 4, 6. Now let's look at our answer of 1 4, 6. Can we simplify 4, 6? Oh, yes, we can. And the factor they share is 2. So we are left with 1 2/3. So 4 3, 6 take away 2 5, 6 is 1 2/3. 8 3/8 take away 2 5/8. So let's look at the wholes of 8 and 2. When we subtract those, we get 6 3/8, and subtracting that with the other fraction of 5/8. So now what we want to do is we want to decompose 6 3/8. So we're going to pull 5 wholes out, and we're left with 1 3/8. All right, but again, we cannot subtract 1 3/8 from 5/8, and we have to break down that whole. And when we do that, that 1 becomes 8/8, and we need to pull down the 3/8. So now we get 11/8. So now we're left with 5 11/8, and bringing down this 5/8 up here. When we bring that down, we're left with 5 6/8. All right, guys, so let's look at that 6/8. Do they have any common factors? Yes, they do. They have a common factor of 2, and we are left with 5 3/4. So 8 3/8 take away 2 5/8 is 5 3/4. All right, solve using any strategy. All right, well, we've learned a lot of strategies to solve subtracting mixed numbers. So I'm going to go back to my favorite. And I'm not sure if it's your favorite, but you could use any strategy. If you want to just pause this video and try out your own way, I'm fine with that. But I'm going to try this way. So I'm going to do the inverse operation. I'm going to start with 4 9/12 and add what to that to give me the goal of 7 3/12. All right, So I'm going to use that blank number line to help. And when I use that blank number line, I'm going to start with our starting number that we have in an inverse operation, which is 4 and 9/12. So what do I need to add to 9/12 to get me to the next hole? Well, the next hole would be a 5. So I jumped to get to that next hole by adding 3 12s to that. All right, now I'm at the next hole, but my goal is to get to this 7. All right, so that means I'm going up this and then here. So I'm adding up another hole. I just added another hole, and then I went up to my goal, which is up to 7. That's my other hole. And then I went up just a little bit up, and I added up to 3 12s. So which would be 7 and 3 12s, which is our goal. So how much did I go up? Well, I went up 2 holes, and 3 12s plus 3 12s gives me 6 12s. So 2 and 6 12s is our answer. So it really depends on how you guys feel comfortable. Do you feel decomposing the numbers, using the number lines, the addition strategy, whatever you feel comfortable. This is the one that I kind of enjoy. I like using that blank number line to kind of visualize to get to my answer. All right, so we're going to continue using any strategy that you feel comfortable. You can pause this video right now and try one of the strategies that you like. I'm going to go with the strategy that we've learned today, which is kind of decomposing the first number and taking that whole and adding it onto the next fraction that we're attached to. So 17 2/16, take away 9 and 7/16. And I'm going to break down 17 and 2/16. And I'm going to pull 16 holes out of there, which means that I'm left with 1 and 2/16. Again, we can't subtract that with 7/16, can we? No. So I am left with here, taking this whole, that would be 6/16 plus that 2/16, which would give me 18/16. All right, so now I'm going to take my 16 and my 18/16. That's a lot to say. And we're subtracting those. And we get 16, 18/16. And taking away the 9 and the 7/16, which is equal to 7, and then 18 take away 7 is 11/16. And 11/16 we can't simplify because 11 and 16 do not share any common factors. So our answer to 17 2/16 take away 9 and 7/16 is 7 and 11/16. It is a mouthful. All right, that was a big problem, but we solved it. Again, any strategy you want to use, choose it. It's up to you, whatever you feel comfortable with. Interesting. I'm in some type of strange lab. Well, it's your time to try out which strategy works for you. I'm trying my own strategy being around here, trying to see what I can come up with, what I'm comfortable with finishing these type of math problems. Good luck. First problem tonight, use any strategy you're comfortable with. 4 and 2/5, take away 1 and 4/5, and I want to see your work tomorrow. Bring in those strategies that you feel comfortable with. I want to see it. Second one, 5 and 3/8, take away 5/8. Use any strategy you're comfortable with, and I want to see your work tomorrow. And your last one, use any strategy, again, that you're comfortable with. 4 1/4, take away 2 3/4, and bring in your work tomorrow. I tried my own strategy in that lab, and now I'm trapped in some type of video game. Help! Good job tonight, guys. Have a wonderful night. Donkey Kong!